Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger of the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our weekly webcast with our founder and president, Helga Zepp LaRouche. Today is July 28th, 2017, and we've had a number of very striking developments in this last week, starting with the completely failed effort to use the appearance of Special Counsel Mueller before the Congress to gin up the whole pressure for impeachment. Helga, you saw some of the video of this. What was your impression of the Mueller testimony?
Well, I only watched for a certain period because it was getting pretty boring because, Mueller, this was long expected and the Democrats had made such a big show about it. But then here was Mueller basically saying, I don't know, let me look in the report. And then, he didn't even seem to remember what Fusion GPS was, which is the central firm in the middle of this whole Russiagate affair. So if you look at the comments afterwards from Michael Moore to Axelrod, David Axelrod, and various other people in the United States who all agree this was a complete disaster, a catastrophe. And I thought the most interesting comment actually came from the renowned lawyer, as I think he's a state lawyer or state law lawyer, Dershowitz, who said that it seems that he did not write the report, at least he didn't know what was in it. Now that brings up a whole bunch of questions. I really thought that if Mueller is in such a bad shape that he cannot stand such a hearing, why did they put him up there? Why did they not just say he had a diplomatic disease, a sudden knee operation or something which would prevent him from being exposed like that? Because obviously if there is a doubt that he even wrote this, then the question is who did write it? And that obviously brings the whole question to the nexus of people who are behind Mueller. And that goes from the Hillary Clinton campaign, the Obama administration, the intelligence chiefs of the Obama administration, all the way to British intelligence with whom there was collusion. Now, I find this very interesting, and now you will have, as the next phase, all these investigations will be hopefully made public from Attorney General Barr, from this U.S. Attorney Durham, but also the Department of Justice Inspector General Horowitz. And all of these are investigating, what was really behind that in terms of Christopher Steele, his connection to British intelligence. And Trump actually, obviously was very happy with the result, namely there was absolutely nothing coming out of this Mueller hearing. So he intervened into one of these programs with Hannity in Fox TV and basically said that now the big question is, who started this, where did it start, and all of this will be investigated. He said these were 3 years of wasted time, wasted money. So I think this is really a complete defeat of those people who tried to use that as an entry point for an impeachment against Trump. And the whole Russiagate, which has been dominating the news for almost 3 years now, has all been absolutely nothing. And obviously the question now is on the table, who did that and what was the intention? And the real culprits hopefully will all come to light.
Well, I think one of the more important points that he made, even though he was very evasive, he kept saying it's not in my purview when talking about things, as you mentioned, the Fusion GPS, which was really the starting point of the so-called official investigation. But he said they found no crime. That's why they had no specific indictments. And it had nothing to do really with this whole Russia thing, except at the end, Mueller made a big pitch that it's still Russia, that the Russians are still intervening. Now, we're at a point where there really is no basis for impeachment. What does this mean in terms of the direction that Trump could go now if he wanted to?
Well, if Trump wants to, he could now make true his election promise and what he said more carefully a couple of times since, namely that he can indeed improve the relationship with Russia, especially, which is very urgent, but by the same token, that he also could uh, respond to the many Chinese offers for cooperation, for a win-win collaboration on the Belt and Road Initiative, on space exploration and research and manned space flight down the road. So, it's really up to Trump right now. And, obviously our colleagues in the United States are not looking at this in a complacent way because, the obstacles are still many. The neocons are still there. The Democrats are still in their crazy mood. So our colleagues from LaRouche PAC in the United States have written a very, very good petition calling for the concrete steps which have to be taken so that Trump can make good on his promise to bring an American and an American woman to the moon by 2024. Now, this petition is very concrete, and it shows exactly what steps have to be taken to not have another situation where things are being canceled, like the Apollo program or fusion research, which was underfunded for decades. But what kinds of steps are necessary, as they have been outlined by the various writings of my late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, which he formulated especially in the 80s. What does it require to have a Moon-Mars program? And I would really urge all of you to look at this petition, sign it, distribute it as far as possible, because I think we need a general education of the population of what is needed to actually fulfill these very ambitious programs. So go to the LaRouche PAC website, look at the petition, and if you agree with it, please sign it and distribute it as widely as you can.
I think one of the most important points is the idea of taking these offers from China for cooperation in space. The Chinese again extended an offer to the United States, and there have been a number of papers written, including a white paper from China. What is it that they're asking the United States to do?
Well, I mean, obviously, you have a situation where many nations are right now, having very ambitious space programs. I mean, you have the Chinese who have the active far side of the moon, Chang'e 4 program, which is eventually supposed to bring helium-3 down to the Earth for mining of thermonuclear fusion. And you have the Indians who finally launched successfully their Chandrayaan 2 program, going to investigate the water on the moon, on the south pole of the moon. You have the announcement that next year China will send a vehicle to the Mars to investigate terraforming. And you have the Trump program, the Artemis program, to bring human beings on the moon by 2024. So, obviously, there is already very far-reaching cooperation among the ESA, Roscosmos, the Chinese Space Agency, Japan, who all just participated in a big conference in Shanghai, agreeing on such moon lunar project cooperation. Now, obviously, the obvious thing would be that the United States reverses its policy, which it imposed in 2011, which led to the Wolf Amendment, prohibiting NASA to cooperate with the Chinese on space research, because this is really an obstacle. Obviously China is about to become the leader in space technology, They may be it already in certain aspects. And obviously, if you think about it, I mean, my husband always said, it's not about carving up the moon or other parts of space. It's getting humanity there. It's making this incredible step, which the fact that with the Apollo 8 program, man could already leave the orbit of the Earth. With the Apollo 11, man could land for the first time on the moon. And now the whole question is to build a village on the moon, and it just would make so much more sense if all the international efforts are being put together. Because obviously we should discuss this a little bit. The steps to be taken are many, and the question of adequate funding is absolutely crucial. So at the same time, this kind of international space cooperation is the absolute necessary basis for what Xi Jinping always calls the shared community for the future of mankind, a situation where geopolitics is overcome and we create the basis for a durable peace for the entire human species. So the purpose of this petition is, among other things, first of all, to discuss exactly what kinds of programs need to be put into a mode of a crash program, and what kinds of areas this international cooperation should take place.
Helga, speaking of international cooperation, there was a very interesting meeting of the foreign ministers of the BRICS countries in Brasilia, where Sergei Lavrov made a very strong statement about the cooperation that's developing. The president of Brazil is going to be going to China. And also there was a part of the discussion where Lavrov said that while there's opposition coming from some networks in America, it's not coming from Trump. So it seems as though this potential for the four-power arrangement, or for the great powers working together, and now with Russiagate potentially lifted as a problem, there's nothing standing in the way, is there?
Well, the only thing which is standing in the way is that there are still, hardcore neocon forces in the United States. For example, the National Defense Strategy of 2017 seems to be the guideline for the next Joint Chief of Staff, General Milley, who was testifying in front of the Armed Service Committee of the Senate, where he repeated all of these lines, that China and Russia are the strategic adversary, that the Belt and Road Initiative is a way of Chinese attempting hegemony, and all of these things, they're unfortunately still there. And because of this very heavy anti-China campaign, there is actually now a new Chinese white book where they describe their military efforts, and China is absolutely increasing its military power in response to this anti-China campaign. I mean, I want to say that emphatically, but in this white paper, they also say basically that they do not intend to ever accomplish hegemony, that they absolutely are working on the shared future, promoting the shared future for mankind, and that it is not their intention to challenge either the United States or anybody else. But one has to see, this kind of paradigm shift, which can only come from international cooperation in space, is a very urgent question. So let's discuss the content of this petition a little bit.
Well, why don't you go ahead and do that? Because I think people can read it, but it's really important for them to get a sense of where this is coming from. So do you have the petition there, Helga? You can look at it?
Well, I don't, but I mean, it defines the steps which have to be taken. One of them being, that you need a crash program for thermonuclear fusion power. Now, this has been made the fourth law of my husband. What must be done to remedy the danger of a new financial collapse. And the crash program of fusion power is absolutely crucial, because for decades now, almost half a century, the line was always fusion is 30 years away. But then if you look at the funding for a fusion crash program, you would need about 50 to 60 billion dollars. Now, if you look at how much the war against Iraq cost, it was $1.4 trillion. If you look at the amount of renewables, the money spent for in 2018, it was almost $300 billion. So obviously, to reach thermonuclear fusion, which replicates the kinds of processes occurring in the sun, and which would create a whole new basis for gaining energy in a completely different process from the second generation of fusion power, where you would use helium-3 as a fuel. This would make the efficiency of energy production several categories more efficient, and it would not just be a new, practically limitless energy source for the human species, but it would also make realistic for the first time interstellar space travel, because it's very obvious that you cannot go to Mars by conventional means using chemical substances as a propulsion, because then you spend about 6 months for one way to Mars, and that is not suitable for the human body. You need actually a speed of one gravity acceleration all the time, which means you go to full acceleration half the way, and then you de-accelerate in the same way, so that the space travel to get to Mars would be reduced to a few days, maybe 2-3 days, or maybe 4. But that is a completely different conception, so that needs to be done. And that would at the same time also mean we will go into a completely different platform of economic technologies, because the spillover effect of that would be probably an order of magnitude bigger than it was for the Apollo project, which was the science driver for the economy on Earth for many years. And the world actually urgently needs such a massive jump in the increase of productivity, and it would benefit all of humanity for a very long time to come. And this is just one area, I mean, obviously, the whole question of using the moon as the stepping stone has also incredible advantages, because the gravity on the moon, because of the lesser size of the moon, is much less. Therefore, it is much easier to lift payloads. You can use eventually all the resources from the moon for industrial production, for projects like going to Mars and see if you can set up colonies there. So all of these are absolutely crucial steps, and I find this absolutely exciting, because the idea to have villages on the moon for permanent stay of human beings. I mean, that is not to say that one person goes and stays on the moon forever, but that you set up, sort of well-defined cities with, as Krista Ericke was explaining at the recent Schiller Institute conference, you have changing seasons, you have parks, you have, woods, you have all kinds of things for people to have recreation, live a very good life, and at the same time be pioneers for that which makes us human, namely to conquer the unknown, to go to ever-changing boundaries in the universe, and establish the identity of the human being as a spacefaring nation, and in that way clearly distinguishing ourselves from all other living beings. And I think this is very exciting. This is all now being discussed. I think you see a new, I said already, a new moon fever. People really have the idea that we are not in an earthbound system, but man can actually, not only lift, vehicles into the orbit, but actually reach other terrestrial heavenly bodies, and set up colonies. I think this is absolutely exciting, and it is the only way how we will get out of this present crisis, and also how to get the kind of science driver to fix the economy, which is in actually bad shape, not only in the United States, but in many parts of Europe. And actually, we need a tremendous boost in productivity if we want to develop the developing countries. But that is all in reach right now, and that is a lot of cause for optimism.
And that's why people should look at the petition, read it, discuss it, sign it, get others to sign it, because what you have is a coalescence of ideas of strategic cooperation, economic effect, and then most important from a lot of what you've been talking about recently is the psychological effect, that we create a new mission for a young generation, which otherwise is being herded into terrorism against culture. We just saw this in Leipzig in the last couple of days with this Extinction Rebellion. That was pretty stark reminder of the danger that we face from this green movement, isn't it?
Well, I think it's definitely clear that the whole green movement is not only economically completely, absolutely, out of it. They have no idea. They're talking about the Green New Deal as being the big boost for the economy. Now, the reason why the Apollo project was such an incredible benefit for the real economy, where every cent invested was returning 14 cents in terms of spin-off effects, everything from computer chips to Teflon pens, and just a whole array of spin-offs, was because it led to a complete breakthrough in science and technology, and it made actually production on the Earth less expensive. While if you go into alternative energies only, already in Germany the energy price is double that of France, and obviously it is the explicit aim of the climate cabinet in Berlin, but also Ursula von der Leyen with her 100-day program have said similar things. If you increase the energy prices up to the point where people supposedly are forced to change their behavior, this can only lead to a complete collapse. I wrote an appeal to German industry, the trade unions, parents and teachers and thinking people to defend Germany as an industrial nation, because it's very clear if this policy is carried out, then young people who want to have a future will leave Germany. They will go to Asia, to China, to other countries. That means the demographic curve in Germany will be more devastating. You will have a lot of old people, nobody to take care of them, and naturally nothing to pay with it, because the bottom from the German economy will just fall out. Now, I don't know, these Extinction Rebellion organization and the Friday for Future we have talked about already in the past. I don't think that they are a spontaneous movement at all. There are people who are pulling the strings in the background. We have started to publish some things about that already. But, to desecrate the statues of Bach and Goethe and so forth, but that just shows you that these people really have absolutely no idea what is important in life, and they're just tools. I think they are being used by some other forces, attached to the city of London and Wall Street, who want to have this boost in renewable energies and make a big buck on such non-functioning technologies just at the moment where the financial system is collapsing. But this is unfortunately happening, and the problem is that the fact that they are being supported, or at least, they get a lot of support by the media. In Stuttgart, where they demonstrated against, people flying, even the authorities of the Stuttgart airport said they support that. I mean, that's just completely crazy, and I'm afraid we are in for some more trouble in the coming period, and people will have to review their views and change their mind on these matters, because what is at stake is really the question of Germany as an industrial nation, and not only that of Germany.
Well, it's interesting to note, as we've covered, that the same people who are financing this green movement, which is becoming much more aggressive, are behind the attacks on Russia and China, and were big supporters of the whole Russiagate. Now, on the other side, we had this statement you referenced last week, the Italian scientists coming out against the whole green fake science. This is beginning to get some coverage, isn't it?
Yes, this is now picking up steam in other countries, for example, in Sweden, where a little while ago 1,500 Swedish scientists signed a similar appeal. They are republishing now the Italian appeal, and also announced that they are preparing something on a European level, and they want to present such a motion to the EU. I mean, the basic argument is that since there is no connection between CO2 emission, that all the measures which are proposed are extremely expensive and not efficient. There is no question that climate change is taking place, but if you look for the wrong cause, which is causing it, then obviously you cannot remedy the causes of such a phenomena. So I think that this is a very important debate, and we have demanded since a very long time that this must be taken out of the area of ideology, and that we need to go back to a scientific approach.
Now, just to go back to Germany for a moment, there are a couple of interesting things. One that you referenced to me earlier was the growing poverty gap in Germany. You brought up the question of utility prices, but I found it interesting, a poll which shows that a majority of Germans would like to have better relations with Russia. Is this going to start shifting in Germany? Do you think, I mean, this is obviously connected to the whole question of the push to keep Germany in the old paradigm, the joining military force in the Persian Gulf, which was rejected by the German government. Where do you think this is heading?
Well, I think that's a very promising sign. There was a poll, I think, by the German paper Tagesspiegel, which found that 72% of the people asked in the East are for dropping the sanctions and having a rapprochement with Russia. And even 54% of people asked in the West of Germany had the same view. So I think that from the standpoint of the population, there is actually an overwhelming desire to really end this whole imposed sanctions and division. So I think that is a very good sign, and I think we are in for periods where these decisions have to be made. So maybe if the Russiagate in the United States stops and Trump would start a positive effort to continue his relation with Putin, which he already attempted at the G20 in Hamburg some years ago, and then again in Helsinki, and more recently in Osaka, then maybe this opposition could go away. But I absolutely think that these are just tiny baby steps, and we need to really think in completely different terms. We need to think in terms of a new epoch. We have to go away from geopolitics and the idea that you have to have blocks like the EU, build up an army in Europe, which is what Macron and von der Leyen are pushing, and that should go against the United States, against Russia and China. I mean, these are all roads which can only lead down the way to a disaster, apart from the fact that I don't think the idea of building up a European army at the present condition of the EU is any realistic perspective. It's just a pipe dream of some warmongers. But I think we need to really think, where should civilization be in 100 years from now, and how should we, form an alliance of countries in the mutual interest. And this is not something we have to start from scratch, because already 130 countries are walking in this direction and forming a new paradigm. And just because in the West the media are so completely really only an extension of the military-industrial complex and the geopolitical British Empire faction, people don't know. And I think there is a tremendous lack of knowledge of the incredibly beautiful options which exist. And this is why I would appeal to you to, support and join the Schiller Institute, because, amplify our efforts, because people are pessimistic because they don't know that other options exist. So you find this almost absurd situation where many people, some people say, oh, there is no problem, and they're completely complacent and say the forces to be will never start World War III. They couldn't do that, which is not true. I mean, there is always still the danger that things could really go completely wrong. And then you have some people who say, oh, there's absolutely nothing you can do. It's all over. It's hopeless. So, between these two positions, people are not acting. And the only thing which will decide that is that people become active with us and shape the next 50, 100 years, because we are at an absolutely crucial epochal change, which has been understood by the Asians much, much better than the Europeans and the Americans. But there is an absolute optimistic way to go. So join us and support our efforts. And that's the best thing you can do for yourself and the future of mankind.
Well, there's nothing I can add to that except people should join the Schiller Institute and organize your friends, family, relatives, co-workers, but most importantly, join the Schiller Institute and sign this petition and circulate it so that we can get the United States into the new paradigm. Anything else you have, Helga?
No, just that you should become active. I think that is really important.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks. We'll see you again next week.
I think so. Bye-bye.